All right, everybody, we'd like to get started now. I know if you're here for the town meeting, it starts at 6:30, so we're going to want to be able to finish this by 6:30. My name is Joel Walk. I am the Vice Chairman of the High School Building Committee. What are you pointing at?
Big microphone right in front of you.
Is it working? Hello? Thank you, Joel. All right, so we're going to do an overview. We're going to start off with our owner's project manager, Tim Bonfatti, who will talk about the process and schedule. And then he's going to turn that over to Carl Franceschi, our architect. The slide you have on top here shows who all the players are. The members of the building committee, TJ Recupero, who many of you know is a selectman, is the chairman. I'm the vice chairman. Dr. Rizzi, who I see, or I thought I saw here, is, there she is, okay. And Mike Hartman, the town manager, Katie Pina Anokian, I'll get that one of these days. Rick Hill from the finance committee, Julie Miller, Maureen Doherty, the procurement officer, Joel Harding, who's standing in the back there, I see. Mike Connolly, who's back there, is a community member, but is also the principal of Mansfield High School. So he's been very valuable. And Roberta Harback is a community member, and she was on the building committee for the Southeast Regional Voc Tech. The committee has worked very hard. We've gone through a process. We've looked at a number of items to make sure that we understand what's going on. We've had a number of these community forums in a variety of places. This one over here is kind of a shorter one because we know, as I say, at 6:30, if you're a town meeting member, you want to go to town meeting. So we'll just kind of move on. So right now, I'm going to introduce Tim Bonfatti, who is from Compass Project Management, who is the owner's project manager. Tim?
Thank you, Joel. So as Joel mentioned, we're the owner's project manager, so we've been hired by the town to oversee the project from start to finish, and including working with the MSBA and making sure that the proper reimbursement is achieved by the town. So I do want to just introduce Dom Taberi in the back of the room. Dom is working with me on the project as the senior project manager. So I'm just going to quickly give you an update on where we are, where we've been, and where we're going over the next few months, so that you can sort of have some context into the decision making and know where you as citizens are going to start to see what you'll be seeing and where the input points are, and how fast we're sort of moving through the process. Joel mentioned, I think, that the building committee actually has been at this project for pretty much a year now. We were hired in January of last year. That was part of the process to then bring on the architect, who is DRA, and Carl Franceschi's here. That sort of got us to the spring or so, where we started on the preliminary design program, which is the first step in this sort of three-step process to get to the point where the town will know exactly what the project is and exactly what the cost will be to the town. So the preliminary design program we worked on with the school, with Principal Miller and her administrative team to develop, and Carl's going to go into more detail of what that meant, but basically we submitted that in September. That listed all of our alternatives and options we were looking at, as well as the educational plan. Then we began work on trying to narrow those alternatives, and we came up with what we're going to show you tonight as the preferred alternative. So that submission is scheduled to happen on December 2nd, and it's on schedule to happen at that time. At that point, it essentially goes into the MSBA, and then they take some time to analyze it. They ask us questions about it. They're very diligent about the process. You know, it's important. This is a collaboration with the MSBA, so while in many ways we need to obviously correspond to their rules and regulations, I think most towns have found that what they do is improve the project. They put a second critical eye to it. They question, why did you move in this direction or that direction? And most people have found that in the end, that's gotten them a project that's better than if they just sort of went at it themselves, never mind the fact that they're getting the reimbursement. So that process will take us till, the goal would be to get into January, the end of January board meeting with the MSBA, where their board would approve the preferred alternative. And then we enter the first phase of real design of that alternative, which is the schematic design phase, which we would start in probably a little ahead of time, assuming we get word that the MSBA is going to approve the preferred alternative. And that would take us to sometime in the spring, where our expectation is to be done with the schematic design phase around March or April. We would then estimate it, and that is when we know for certain what the cost and what the sort of pro forma of the project will be. And that'll also be where we engage the MSBA on what the reimbursement is, what our eligible costs, what our incentive points are. That would lead us to a MSBA board meeting to approve the project and moving forward to design and construction for May of 2016. So it's moving, productively and in a very deliberate process, and the building committee has been very good at, and has invested a lot of time in working through a very deliberate process to get to the point where we are now, and then even more so moving forward to May of next year. Once, assuming the MSBA board approves the project, it then will be brought to the voters first at town meeting in May, and then in a debt exclusion vote in June. So at that time, everyone will know the budget, the schedule, the impact to the taxpayer, and what the project looks like. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carl, who is going to go into a little more detail about some of these phases and what we're going to be showing you tonight.
Thanks, Tim. Let me put this in my pocket so I could move around a little bit and clip this on here so the cable folks can hear me. Let me see if I can. How's that? Is that good? Good. Let me see if I can control the slides from here. Look at that. Great. I just want to expand a little bit on the process, because I think it is important for people to understand that this process is one that we've worked with a lot, but it was actually developed by the state, the School Building Authority in Boston. And one of the key things is that we spend time first thinking about what the program for the building should be before we design anything. We don't just jump right in and start assuming it's going to be new construction or renovation or things like that. We spend time looking first at the existing building, analyzing the conditions here of the existing high school, and we spend a lot of time developing the educational program, the second item up there. And actually, before we even came on board, the administration, superintendent and principal and teachers have been, and school committee have been thinking about that educational program for a number of years now. How can we better teach and learn here in Stoughton? And what would a high school look like? Regardless about physical, building, what would it look like? What would the organization of it be? What would the curriculum be? How would instruction, be taught differently than it is now? Things like that are thought about. And in that first step, as Tim said, is when we start looking at alternatives. And those alternatives included looking far and wide in the town of Stoughton for a site for the high school. We didn't assume necessarily it would be on this site. Then once we've developed those alternatives, the second step, which we're finishing up right now, as it says December, that's when we're going to submit this, right after Thanksgiving, is narrowing down those alternatives to a single preferred option. And that's what we'll share with you tonight. And if we need to, we update the educational plan. And as I said, we evaluate the options, and I'll show you how we've tried to do that objectively here. And then the third phase, which comes up this spring, is really the scope and budget and schedule for the project, where we add more detail to the preferred option so that we can put a good cost estimate on it, and ultimately the town of Stoughton can reach an agreement with the state and sign what's called a project funding agreement where the reimbursement is identified, the schedule for the project, the details, the scope are identified, and that happens in the spring, just in time for your town meeting and debt exclusion votes to follow that up. So as I said, if you are a town meeting member, you'd be looking at this project at your annual town meeting coming up in this spring, right after the board votes on it in May. Just briefly about the educational program, as I said, it's very important to this process that we think about what the high school should be before we start designing. We had a series, let me see if I can get my pointer here. Excuse me. We had a series of meetings, visioning sessions with a broad group of constituents here that included the administration, teachers, parents, even some students, ourselves, educational consultants were brought in, and it helped identify, what Stoughton High School wants to be in the future. What is it now? What is it? How could it transition to something that would serve well into the future? Because as we know, the building is going to be here. Your current high school, parts of it have been here almost 100 years. Other parts more like 50 years, and I'm sure whatever we build is going to be here well into 50 years into the future. And it talks about, ways of learning, the 4 C's of 21st century learning, talk about communication and collaboration, creativity, problem solving, and so forth. So there were thoughts about, how does the school want to be organized in terms of the curriculum, and a couple of diagrams that were important here that came out of those sessions. One of these, if you can see that diagram, it's a cluster of classrooms, as opposed to classrooms as they are now in the current high school. Instead of just being stretched along a corridor with room on either side, all of equal size, the clustering of classrooms talks about breaking down the school into smaller learning communities, having a mixture of spaces, both open spaces for collaboration, smaller group spaces, partly for tutoring and special ed, having teachers' rooms immediately adjacent to those clusters, and other support spaces and so forth. And then this diagram, too, is one more that I'll touch on. The way the school is currently organized is departmentally. It's very traditional. A lot of high schools are organized that way. The math rooms are together, the English rooms, the social studies rooms. But in the future, that may not be the case for the way the school wants to be organized. Maybe there'd be a 9th grade academy for entering freshmen to help them with the transition from middle school. Maybe there's a STEM academy where students who are more interested in those subjects are clustered together. And again, it's somewhat of a school within a school kind of concept. And the other thing to notice in this diagram as well is, the academic wing is kind of grouped together, and then kind of the community wing is organized together, the gym, the auditorium, and those spaces, because there is just one high school in town. It is a significant building with a lot of resources that can be used for community uses. It's not just a high school that's used during the school year and the school day. So as I said, we did look at existing conditions, and for those who aren't familiar, there's some videos online, or if you get a chance to tour the high school, you should perhaps familiarize yourself with that. The building is old and tired, even though it's been maintained as best as possible given the circumstances, but there's significant needs to the existing building from a facilities point of view. And also from a space point of view, this is a floor plan of the existing high school. These are the classroom wings. Here's the auditorium. Here's the gymnasium, the library, and A building, the oldest portion. We analyzed the size of classrooms and compare them and of all spaces, and compare them to current standards. And a lot of spaces in the current school are undersized. The gymnasium is significantly undersized. Most all of the science classrooms and science labs are undersized. The library is undersized. The spaces in green are the ones that actually meet current standards. So there's actually many, I think it's the majority of spaces in the existing building are either marginal, which are shown in the tan color here, or deficient, shown in the red color. And then, as I mentioned, we before starting design, we searched for the best site for the high school. We didn't assume necessarily that this Pearl Street location was the one and only site for the high school. We looked at 10 other properties in town of all kinds and developed some criteria to analyze them. So again, it wasn't, based on sort of emotional factors or other kinds of considerations. We tried to be objective about it. And you can see all these X's show that for one reason or another, every one of these sites was excluded and was not suitable or appropriate for a new high school. Part of it was ownership. The town didn't own the property, and it would cost significant dollars to acquire it, even if it could be acquired. The location, again, because there's just one high school, there's really a need for it to be central in town, if at all possible. And some of these sites were literally at the very edge of town. Access, and it needs to be on a major road. There's a fairly significant amount of traffic associated with a high school, cars, buses, and so forth, and pedestrians. Did the sites, were they suitable from an access point of view? Were they large enough in terms of just buildable area? Some parcels at first seemed large enough, but then once you looked at the wetlands or the topography or other restrictions, right-of-ways or easements, it reduced the size of them. So that was a number of them were excluded for that reasons and so forth. So in the end, we came down to the fact that the Pearl Street site is the best site for the high school in Stoughton. But again, we didn't necessarily assume that it was going to be a new school or an addition or renovation as yet. And again, trying to be objective about it, we developed this decision tree, so to speak, where the first question, which we just talked about, is, should it be a new site or should it be the existing site? These were all the 10, these rectangles represent those 10 parcels we looked at, all of them eliminated for various reasons. So we're on this side of the decision tree. And the next major question was, should we utilize the existing building or should we think about new construction? And if we think about utilizing the existing building, can we do it within the existing walls and just renovate the building? Or do we need to do some amount of addition and or demolition as well? And in the end, it turns out that none of the pure renovation options made sense. So that one was eliminated. We came down to 4 addition renovation options and 4 new construction options. So we did study in some amount of detail 8 options. There's also the one on the end, the base repair, which is really just kind of a baseline for cost comparison reasons, that we wanted to calculate how much would it cost just to fix the existing building and bring it up to code without changing anything educationally, without enlarging any rooms or rearranging any spaces, just fixing things. So it's not really an option, but it is useful for comparison reasons. And as I said, we came down to these 8 options. In a preliminary evaluation, we quickly eliminated half of them. And so we really focused on 4, 2 addition renovations, 2 new construction options that we took to a greater level of detail so we could put preliminary cost estimates on them. And we'll share that with you in a moment. So 2 of them, as I say, were addition renovations. The reason they're 2 and 3, because we had numbered these 1, 2, 3, 4, and these were 1, 2, 3, 4. We had a couple variations, so they ended up being named 1A and 2A. These are family B, so these were B2 and B3. These are C, C1A, and C2A. And ultimately, what we ended up with is these diagrams. As I say, 4 addition renovations. These are the floor plans of the existing school. The blue areas are the existing building to be retained and renovated. The tan areas are the portions of new construction. So you can see at this extreme, we're saving most of the existing building, adding a couple of small additions. To this extreme, where we're saving just a small portion of the building, the part we're in right now, the cafeteria and the auditorium, and most of the project is new construction. So this was 1, 2, 3, 4. In the end, as I said, we preliminarily eliminated 2 of them and kept these 2 for further study. Likewise, On the new construction options, we looked at 4 of them. These are site plans, aerial photographs, showing 1, 2, 3, 4 possibilities for new construction on the existing site. And they may be hard to see, but in each case, there's a slightly different location and or configuration for the new building. So in one of them, it's L-shaped, close to Adams Street. Another, it's a courtyard shape. Here's a courtyard shape, but more in the center of the site. And here's another shaped building here that's on top of the baseball field, really, behind the existing school. And again, the preliminary analysis eliminated 2 of those right away, and we focused on these 2. This is C1A and C2A that we developed further and put cost estimates to them. And the way we analyzed them was by developing these criteria. And they came out of meetings like this, meetings with the building committee, meetings with the administration, and so forth. You know, right at the top of the list is cost. That's certainly an important criteria to evaluate these options. But also, equally kind of at the top of the list is how does the building satisfy that educational program? It's the whole reason we're doing the project. Ultimately, it is a school. How well does it satisfy that? And that took a number of criteria in terms of meeting the vision, flexibility, the flow, and so forth. And there were a number of other criteria that were used as well. And we turned that into a matrix like this so that, I know you can't read them, but those criteria are down the left side here, and all of the options, this is when we had 8 options, were across the top there. And as we said, we quickly eliminated 4 of them. You can see the way we judge these, the green is good, the darkest green is good, the red is bad. So it's kind of qualitative, most advantageous to least advantageous. So once we narrowed it to 4, we used the same kind of matrix again with a little bit more detail, a little bit more understanding now of each of those options. But once again, it became readily apparent that this C2A option here was the most advantageous of the 4 options. And I want to point out this line here is the one that deals with cost. And it turns out that cost was a relatively neutral factor because all of these ended up, the total project cost and especially the cost to Stoughton was fairly similar, within 1 or 2%. And in a project like this that really makes it sort of cost neutral, that allowed us to look at the other factors, most importantly, how well did it meet the educational program. And in that regard, you can see that this one scores very well. A lot of green in this one, no red. And so this meeting tonight is timely because just within the last week, the building committee, the selectmen, the school committee have all come to the same conclusion and unanimously voted to recommend that we pursue C2A option and submit that to the state and carry it to the next step. So that's why we want to share with you tonight what that option looks like. And again, this is still preliminary, but we can share with you everything that we've developed to date in this regard. So this shows it's an aerial view, obviously. Here's Pearl Street. Here's the existing high school right here. This is where the new school would be situated, kind of diagonally behind the existing school. And it can be built in its entirety, the building itself, while this existing school stays in operations. That's sort of one of the criteria for all of the new options. We wanted to make sure that could happen to minimize disruption to the existing school. Certainly, we will disrupt the athletic fields. This is sitting on top of the track and a little bit of the existing football field. But the drop-off areas, the parking areas, the service into the school can remain for the existing building during the construction phase. And here's what it would look like, after the building the existing high school is demolished. There'd be here's the new school, here's the new front door. There'd be a new track and soccer field, a new football field, new tennis courts, a new driveway and drop-off areas front and back. And the site plan looks like this. If you can see that here, here's Pearl Street. The existing high school sits right about here. So this is the new school. Here's Adams Street. The parking lot right outside the window here is right about there. So the new school from where we're standing would be kind of out the door and to the right, right there. The way the traffic flow works, the same curb cut off Pearl Street would be maintained, and then there'd be a gradual driveway down to the front door here with a drop-off area and a parking area right in front, right next to the administration area. That driveway would connect to Adams Street, but the traffic could turn around and go back out or flow this way, whichever way, so it's well distributed. And it's separated entirely from the bus drop-off, which is in the back side of the school, and there's a back door that comes into a common lobby into the building. So the buses would enter the site off Adams Street and continue on to the middle school. As they do today, they could serve both schools simultaneously. And then there is a parking area on three sides of the building, so the parking is well distributed around the building. And the building itself is organized, I'll show you the floor plans in a moment, with the classroom wing here, those classrooms organized in clusters like we showed in the education plan, and then the common areas, the gymnasium and auditorium on this side of the building. So the lobby kind of divides the building in half. And in the center of the building is the cafeteria and the library on the upper floor. The floor plans look like this. So they're turned a little bit now from that site plan. Here's the front door, here's the back door, here's the linear lobby through the building. So this is the gymnasium and locker rooms. This is the auditorium with the music areas behind the stage. So that's kind of the community side of the building. Obviously students will use it as well, but it's sort of termed that. And then the classroom wing is organized around this courtyard, and you can see the clusters here. So there are large classrooms, small classrooms, the teachers' rooms, boys and girls' rooms, support spaces, science labs. So there you can see how that cluster kind of acts like a small learning community, a school within a school, if chosen to operate that way. And as I say, in the center of the building is the cafeteria, but unlike this space, which is more or less dedicated to mainly lunchtime, here in the future school, the cafeteria could be more properly called a commons, a student commons, because it would be used before school as a gathering spot, during school for between classes, or even during classes for projects and collaborative work, obviously at lunchtime, but after school as well. It could be a place for students to come together or other special activities. It really is kind of an extension of the lobby. There's no wall there. That's all one open space. It will have columns like this and other sort of spatial dividers, but it's basically an extension of the lobby that could be a pre-function space for things in the auditorium, like tonight before a town meeting. Say this commons area could be set up with displays or seating areas, or for a basketball game on a Friday night. It could be, a concession area and so forth at halftime or before or after. It has a lot of functions. It really helps make the building a community facility. Upstairs, the classroom wings repeat on 3 stories, so this same organization happens on 3 levels. It's a very compact plan, which is another positive aspect of it. And on this level now, in the center of the building, is the library. But it too is more of a commons area as well, because it's readily accessible from the corridors on 3 sides. It could be very open. It could have a lot of glass to it. And again, it's meant to support the classrooms. That's part of the education plan. It's not just a room that's quiet and at the end of the hall. It's really in the heart of the building. So this is the gym at this level now, with an upper lobby and a stair and a stair and an elevator serving that upper lobby, and it's the upper part of the auditorium. So you can enter the back of the auditorium at this level. On the first floor, you enter the mid-level of the auditorium. So it's a steeply sloped auditorium that connects the first and second floor. And then the third floor is just classroom wing, essentially, at this level, and just the upper parts of the gym and the auditorium there. And let me see if I can share with you, if I can get this to work one-handed here. This will reach. I'll turn on our 3-dimensional program here. Right here. Oops, I went too far. There it is. if I can keep talking and maneuver this. This is sort of live here, so we can rotate this around. And this gives you the what it would look like during construction. So the two buildings would be coexisting simultaneously during construction. You can see there's a gap there in between of about 30 or 40 feet, but the entire new school could be constructed all at once. And then sort of going back to what it would look like when the school is removed. This is the approach from Pearl Street here where the driveway is. And then this is the gradual, let me turn this a little bit, the gradual driveway down to the front door. So we're looking at, let me zoom in on that. Right there's the front door. You can see these cars. That's the parent drop-off right there. This block right here where this canopy is, that's the administration building. So it's right at the front door for greeting visitors, obviously for security purposes. And then this larger block there is the gymnasium with some high windows there. So if we look at this now, you can see, backing off a little bit, there's a lot of glass right in the center of the building there where the lobby would be. That's the linear lobby going through. And on the right is the classroom wing, 3 stories high. Yeah, and as we say, this is early on here. We're looking at this, as a massing study. It doesn't have windows on it yet. It doesn't have the materials that we'd actually use. That's all part of the next phase of study. And just let me swing around one more time here. This is the other side, the so-called back entrance, if you want to call it that, from the bus drop-off side. So there's a dedicated bus loop there, and those students enter into the same space, the same lobby space from this side of the building. And there's more parking there, too, for an event in the auditorium or gymnasium. And then just to show you the relationship to the middle school, let me slide this over a little bit. There's the middle school right there. So Cushing is kind of at the bottom of the slide there. That student parking lot off of Cushing would still be there. We'd connect into that. And you can see the new track and soccer field. And basically the entire school, new school, would be at the level of the current football field that's out there now. Let me go back to the other show right there. And just a couple more. I don't know, we'll talk to the cost briefly. Tim, you want to talk to this? Okay, yeah, they want to record this too, I guess. Let me put this here.
So Carl gets to talk about all the good stuff. So here's the bill. It's important to point out at this stage that this is not a budget for the project. We have to do something to be able to measure the project to the options to each other. So it's a comparative purpose, but it's not a budget. We don't know yet really what the MSBA reimbursement will be. Sorry about that. We don't know even, a lot of the critical cost components. As Carl mentioned, the next phase of design, schematic design, is when a lot more detail gets put on the plans and can be priced. But based on sort of concept numbers and what we know of in terms of other projects and what current, projects are costing for high schools are costing, whether they're ad reno or new, this is sort of a total project budget. So as you can see, this includes everything from the construction cost, the single biggest line item, the third one down, through even design and administration and furniture and technology and equipment, contingency, so that we have enough contingency to manage unexpected occurrences during the project. And we did try to project the reimbursement from the MSBA, but as I said, that's not been decided yet. So relative to each other, this is pretty accurate. And as you can see, and as was mentioned, the costs are not significantly different. B3 is the single largest kind of cost to the town, but the cost between the C option, C1 and 2 and versus B2 are pretty much within what we would consider a margin of error at this stage to say that they're pretty equal. So those are the costs, and in very quick summary form. As far as the schedule goes, as I mentioned, we're going in the summer to get approval of this, hopefully from the town as well as the MSBA at the start of the summer. If that happens, the design phase would take about a year to complete and bid. And so the construction would start in the summer of 2017 and would be, it's about a 2-year project to build a new school. And then it's about a year roughly to demolish this school and redo the landscape and the fields that kind of finish out the site, so that the first occupancy of the new school would be the fall of 2019, and the project would be completed, sometime around the summer of 2020. So that's the issue. I don't know if you want me just to address. Sure. Yep.
How does this get voted on? Is it the Board of Selectmen or the taxpayers?
So this has to have a two-step.
Open vote for taxpayers?
Yes, yeah. So this has a two-step process. So town meeting has to approve it by a 2/3 vote. And then it goes to a debt exclusion election, which is an election for the whole town to come and vote it. Any other questions on the cost or what?
What's the expense so far been for all of this?
For what you're seeing now? Well, the town appropriated $1 million for the full feasibility phase, which pays through to next May. $1 million. To date, I don't have that number in front of me, but I'm thinking to date we've probably spent about $500,000 of that, roughly. There was a slide, I just did want to, I did want to talk quickly about, how do I go back, Colin? We intend, the committee is very committed to a transparent process. The building committee, that was one of the criteria they set up right in the very beginning. So we've done a number of meetings, as have been mentioned. We're continuing to do more meetings as we move through the next phases, so people get to see the project, understand exactly what it will look like, and once it starts to develop. There's a lot of opportunities for people to find out, besides the fact that we'll have regularly scheduled forums, there's also opportunities for, the building committee meetings are open to the public, so those are once a month, and they're televised as well. You'll see them on cable TV. And then there are places where people can ask questions online if you go to the Stoughton Public Schools website and click on the high school budget, the high school building project, you will be able to be, first of all, you'll get information including all the presentations that are made, the designs, the budgets, schedules, but you can also click on a link to ask questions, and we try to get back to you as quickly as we can on them. And then if you follow Facebook, there is a very active Facebook, whatever that term is, chain, I guess, page that basically puts everything in kind of that happens pretty much every meeting and every development on the project on Facebook. So as I said, there's been a real attempt to make sure we stay in touch and make sure that people get their questions answered. And that's the building committee's made that commitment throughout the course of the project. That kind of outreach will happen all through construction. When we do these projects, we have regular neighborhood meetings for people to come and hear what's happening, to express concerns about impacts on neighborhoods and provide that kind of opportunity. So are there any other questions for people?
On the classroom size, on the plans that you've decided on, how much bigger are the rooms going to be? And how many students per classroom are they going to be?
So the classroom sizes, which are dictated by the MSBA regulations, the proposed have to be a certain range, a minimum and a maximum. And I think the current classrooms are
They're a little over 700.
little over 700, and the proposed classrooms will be around 825 to 850. 850.
That's big enough?
Yeah, well, the science classrooms are 1,400. The science labs are much bigger, and the large spaces are much bigger, but the actual general classrooms are 850, which is, roughly 10 or 15% bigger than the current classrooms.
Parking, is it going to be more parking or less?
I think it's been designed as parking neutral, right, for the car?
Slightly more, and
Slight-
they're all on the property, not like these are out here off of Adam Street, where they head in right off the street. They're actually going to be much safer and more organized on the property.
So there's slightly more, and they will be all on the property and organized.
So will the Adam Street parking go away, or will that remain?
No, that will go away as on-street parking. It'll be a through street. We'll redo the curb line and bring those spaces onto the property.
That's concerning from a community standpoint. I mean, there are a lot of events that happen here that people wind up parking 3/4 of a mile away because there's no parking anyway. People will show up.
Well, as you said, there will be more parking on site and more striped parking in striped
Yeah.
spaces. And in addition, we have some longer driveways that for an event, you could parallel park on one side of the driveway as well. But that's a good thing. We'll do a calculation to see what the maximum safe, occupancy is.
Is
for
there
those kinds
any
of
place
events.
between the high school and the junior high that they could make another parking lot?
We do have one there. If you look at that site plan back there, there is a parking lot that is going to connect between the high school and the junior high, and we're actually going to extend that lot that's next to the middle school now. So that grows a little bit too.
But this is good information, though. I mean, we will try to look at what we can to maximize parking. The next phase will do
We
that.
always have to be a little careful, considerate too of the balance between having a lot of pavement,
Right.
which causes a lot of runoff, and drainage issues. One of the advantages of the option that we're recommending is that it's a more compact footprint. It actually has less, impervious rooftop surface than the current building does, which improves the drainage. We want to be careful that we don't pave the whole site and then, kind of negate that advantage. So we kind of balance the two. And we do realize there are events here, often a lot of community events, but still, it's the day-to-day traffic that we're, most concerned about and accommodating. And we think about ways to accommodate the special event parking, on a slightly different basis.
There's another, you've had,
So, and correct me where I'm wrong, but what I'm looking at is that the meeting with the BSEA is in May, right? And if we're looking to go before town meeting in June, how is that going to work? Because you need, maybe about 7 weeks for warrant preparation and submission? Can you speak to that?
yeah, I will. So for the meeting with the MSBA they haven't put their schedule out for meetings yet for 2016, but that based on sort of what we understand it to be would be May. So the way it works with the MSBA is basically the deal, meaning the scope, budget, schedule that Carl mentioned comes out of the schematic design, has to be completed about 6 weeks before their scheduled board meeting. So we know 6 weeks or maybe even a few weeks more than that, but 6 weeks more at least, 6 weeks before the scheduled, pardon? Beginning of April, what the deal would be. And we will also know from the staff, no project that the staff has allowed to get to the board has not been approved by the board. So that we know pretty well before it gets to the board whether it's going to be approved or not. So the town would be voting on, with full knowledge, several weeks before the board meeting.
So basically, when you submit that, you'll get an answer about 6 weeks or so in advance of when the meeting is? So then you will have enough time, you feel, to make the warrant submission process?
Yes, yeah. I mean, we have to work out all the details, but that's the plan. Yep.
Where are the other kids' sporting events going to take place during the whole construction? Like you're going to build a new school on top of the football field?
So we've talked about this at the working group. I don't know whether Principal Miller or Superintendent Rizzi want to address that, but this is about where sporting events would be during the course of construction, because you're correct, we take up a significant amount of field space.
Hi there. So the athletic director, Ryan Donahue, is already been planning and thinking about that well ahead of this project. We are luckily not the only school that's gone through a project. Our neighbors, many of our neighbors have gone through this project, so he's been able to lean on other athletic directors for advice and potential spaces where we could play and move to. It will be a little bit of an inconvenience for our students. It would mean busing them to other locations, definitely. In terms of football, it would mean likely no home games for a little bit of period of time. But he has a good plan in place. We have a lot of great relationships with a lot of local businesses and other schools where we would be able to have our kids continue their athletics without cancellation.
Any other questions?
Could you talk about when the lead energy efficiency goals get decided and how that process works?
So we have decided to pursue the lead. So we get extra reimbursement from the MSBA, the town of Stoughton does, if they can maximize their lead up to its lead silver to get the 2 points of extra reimbursement. So we've made the commitment already to get the 2 points of lead silver. I don't think we've had a discussion much beyond that if we're going to go.
Literally right now, we started filling out the
Started out the scorecard, the lead scorecard right now.
It's part of that submission on December 1st. We have to turn in a preliminary lead scorecard. So we are going for lead silver, which is higher than just certified. It will definitely be a green school. We're very concerned about operating costs and trying to minimize those in the future, particularly where the state shares in the initial cost and Stoughton reaps all the benefits, so to speak, in the future of operating cost savings. So the more we can sort of take advantage of that, the better.
And we found, I think lead silver generally, most people now believe, doesn't add much, if anything, to the construction cost, the premiums around lead silver. I mean, it might if you start using photovoltaics, but it's not a significant premium. Any other questions? So if you do have any questions at all, please use the website or stick around. Yeah, we'll be here if you want to have any questions, talk to us individually, but do also encourage you to communicate as much as you want. We want to make sure people understand the project as to whatever extent they feel they need to. So thank you for coming tonight, and we look forward to seeing you at future meetings.
Thanks very much.